documentation and reporting requirements webinar. We're happy you're here and looking forward to going through this, as I know it's been a much anticipated training. So what is Match? We talked a little bit about this in our workshops, but to go into a little more detail here, Match is the cash share contribution by the school district to support Gear Up students and families. However, when we say cash share, we don't necessarily mean a monetary contribution, but it's the value of the goods and services and staff time that school districts are committing to the program. And almost all of that share comes in-kind support, which means it's not a financial commitment. It's a commitment of time and resources. The reason that we ask school districts to participate in the Match collection is that it does demonstrate their commitment and engagement with the Gear Up program. So we want you to be vested in this process, vested in this program. It also helps build sustainability over time, in that if you're able to contribute at least some resources to the project over the next 7 years, then there is that potential of building sustainable practices. And very common sources are staff time, non-staff time, meaning other people from outside the school district contributing their time, goods and services donations like pizza or college swag, scholarships, and other grants that support career and college readiness that the district may receive during this time. Some Match basics include that anything used for Match must be allowable under the uniform guidance. So if you're a district fiscal person, you're probably familiar with uniform guidance. If you're a new advisor, graduation specialist, or another role, that may be a new term for you, but that is the federal guidance that says how grants can spend money. And it provides a list of some of those items so that we know what's allowable and what's unallowable. I'm a little worried that this slide isn't updated. I may have saved, so no alcohol was supposed to be out of this slide, but they may include items that WAGU doesn't allow us as expenditures. So for example, we can't pay for entertainment, but if you were able to get WSU to donate football tickets to use while you're on a campus visit, you can use that as Match, or the value of that as Match. Any college swag that recruiters or other folks donate to you and maybe given to students also can be considered Match. And then incentives. So we talked last week about how incentives are generally not allowable or very limited, but whatever incentives are donated to the program can definitely be used as Match. So that might include food, giveaways, snacks, treats, gift cards. And then everything that you turn in to us will be reviewed by Feather Wagner to make sure it is meeting all of those requirements. So how much Match is required? So for us as a federal program, we are required to submit $1 of cash or in-kind match for every dollar we receive in federal funding. So we're receiving $5 million a year in federal funding for the next 7 years. So we are required to collect a total of $35 million in match during that same time period. We have various resources for that in addition to the school partnerships. So for example, we receive about $1 million a year from the agency that goes toward our match. And we have internal staff time that can be counted as match that are staff that are outside of Gear Up. So what we have done is we've been able to reduce the cash match for the school district partners to 55 cents for every $1 of grant funding that you receive based on your actual expenditures. So for example, if you received $100,000 in grant funding this year, but you only spend $80,000 of it, then you're required to match 55 cents per dollar of that $80,000 because that's what you actually spent. And again, that can be both in cash or in-kind match. On our Gear Up website in the grant management manual, there is considerable guidance related to match. So I've put all those links here, and we will send out this PowerPoint at the end of this training. So you'll have this to refer to, or I think by now you're all familiar with that Gear Up website, and so you can find these there on your own. But they include general guidance. There's a quick reference guide that looks very similar to the expenditure guide that we handed out to you at the workshop last week. Then there's an outline for training your staff on match collection and documentation. There's also a PowerPoint template that you can use for both orientation and match training, and those are live now, so you'll be able to access that there. That is a customizable PowerPoint, so you can add information about your own program to that template. And then we have sample forms and the actual forms to fill out, and I'll cover those in more detail in just a bit. I need to just cue something up right now. All right. So you will submit your match documentation to Box by the 25th of each month. And that's the same due date for your A19 reimbursement documentation. So those due dates do align. And there will be 3 types of forms required. The first one is the monthly match summary form. And so that is a summary or a detailed summary of each of the forms that you submitted. So for example, if you submit 2 in-kind match goods and services forms and 3 in-kind match school staff, then you're going to have 5 entries on that monthly match summary form. And then please keep in mind that those due dates are really important. And if for any reason you don't submit your match by the 25th of each month, we may withhold your reimbursement until we receive that. Now, a common question is, do I have to meet that 55 cents per dollar match each month? And the answer is no, but you need to be making a significant effort toward that. So you're all just getting started, you're just learning match, you're just getting services done right now and starting in February. So you might not have 55 cents for every dollar you spend for December, January, and February. We understand that, but we want to notice that you're making good progress each month, I apologize, toward that match requirement. So another rule is that federal funds cannot be used to match federal funds. So this might include Title I funds, any AmeriCorps support you have in the district, including any cash match that you pay toward that service or support, regardless of that funding source. Military presentations and time, including the ASVAB assessment, school nutrition services, time, and meals. However, we may use Gear Up funds to pay for meals. So if you go on a field trip and have nutrition services prepare the sack lunches for that trip, we can pay the regular student price for those meals. We just can't use any of that as match. And then if you have staff who are paid by any federal fund source during the contract day, that time can never be used as match. However, any of their unpaid time outside of the contract day is allowable if it's focused on Gear Up specific and supported activities. So I'm going to go to this form, and here's the tricky part. I'm going to go to the form and then share screen so you can see this form so we can just review this. So this is the match form for school staff. So I'm going to stop sharing and then share my new screen. I could probably do that a little easier next time. Go. All right, so here I am on our website. I've selected the Grant Managers tab. And then I'm going down to, remember I call these the file cabinet drawers. So in this file cabinet drawer, we have the in-kind match for school staff form. And so here's that form. And you can see on this form that, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. You can see that there's a space up here for staff to fill out their name and the school name and then mark their role. So there needs to be a checkbox. And I always say in Gear Up, if there's an empty box, that means information needs to go in it. So you'll want to remember, if there's a box, you need to put some information. And then you can see here, we have 15 different codes listed. And so these are all the activities that your staff at any level could be engaged in that would be allowable match. So the first one is provided information about college and career opportunities and preparation. So if they're doing this during the school day or outside of the school day, in this box, they'd put a 1, and then they would fill out how many hours they spent doing that. Then they're going to leave their salary and benefits blank because folks don't know what their salary and benefits is generally on an hourly rate, especially the benefits part. And that can add 30 to 50% or more to the value of their salary. So you're going to have them leave that blank. And then at the end of the month, when you collect these forms, you're going to work with HR and payroll to get those amounts entered in, and then they're going to add up down here so you don't have to do that. We do need that contributor's signature, and whoever is going to be the designated district person, their signature as well. You can do these forms electronically. So if you want to send them out and have staff do them electronically, you can use something like Adobe Sign or DocuSign, whatever your district uses as an official signature. Or you can print them out and sign them, the normal way. But that's that form. And again, make sure you're looking at these 15 reasons that staff time can be counted as match. So you're capturing all of that. And when you're doing your staff training, you'll want to make sure that you cover these and discuss these so they know all the opportunities there are to contribute match. I'm going to stop sharing that, and I will do this more efficiently next time, I promise. All right, going back to this screen. So it is actual hourly salary plus the benefits, as I said, and your district office staff will be helpful in collecting that, and you'll want to work out a system with that group to make sure those are getting done accurately. Then additional folks that can count as match are administrators. So every minute that an administrator spends supporting the program is counted as match. So for example, if you brought a team to the training last week, then every person who spent time at the training that is not paid by Gear Up staff, all of that time counts as match. So it's a good way to start documenting right now because there were a lot of folks in the room at both our East and West Side meetings. If you have counselors, they're a little tricky. So in some school districts, they are considered part of the administrator pool, but most often they're considered certificated staff and part of that pool. So if they are administrators or considered administrators, then all the time committed to helping you specifically with Gear Up tasks would be allowable as match. But again, most of the time they're certificated staff, and so anything that they're doing is really part of their normal day-to-day job, so that shouldn't be counted as match. However, any time outside the contract day, so if they come to a family event, for example, that can be counted as match. Teachers, anytime beyond the contract day, as long as it aligns with one of those 15 options, is considered match. So we all know teachers work outside of their contract day all the time. It's very normal. And so if they're preparing a rigorous class lesson for Monday that's new, that definitely supports Gear Up goals, then that time over the weekend can be counted as match. Gear Up staff, actually, you can also contribute match time if you volunteer outside of your contract day. So if you're contracted to work 8 hours and there's a day that you work 10 and you're not flexing your time, then that other 2 hours can be contributed as match. And on that form I shared earlier, there is a section where it does say, ask you to verify that this was outside of your Gear Up paid time. And then classified staff, so this might be secretaries, this might be custodians, this might be paras, anytime at all, as long as they're not paid with federal funds, that they're supporting you and your activities can be counted as match. So for example, if the custodian is helping set up for an event, his time is match. If the school nurse may not be considered classified, but school nurse time helping you prepare health forms for field trips, that can be considered match. Secretary time getting you a DF list or helping with data or whatever they might be helping with that's related directly to Gear Up can be counted as match. Then substitutes, we will pay for substitutes for Gear Up activities, but sometimes districts choose to cover that cost themselves. And so if it's not paid for by Gear Up, then any substitute costs, including benefits, can be counted as match. Just going to pause there. Are there any questions related to staff time? Okay, I don't see any, so I'll move on. Then quite often, Gear Up programs have other volunteers outside of school employees to help with programming. So all of those folks and all of that time will be considered match. And it's a great way to collect match because we do get a lot of guest speakers. Career and college fairs are a classic way to get volunteers. Maybe you have someone coming in to volunteer to mentor or tutor students. All of those folks are considered a valuable match. So can you see the match form now? Much more efficient. Okay. So this form is called the in-kind match goods and services form. I will say that this is a form where we most commonly see errors. So when you're collecting these forms and working with donors to get these completed, you'll want to really be sure that they're getting all of the information you need. So we need their name, their job title, where they're from, if they are with an organization, and the address. And that's either their personal address or the organization they're representing's address. The school name and the school district. Then the date of the actual contribution, you'll fill that in, they will fill that in. And then a detailed description of the service provided. So an example of a detailed description is guest speaker for AVID class based on career exploration. So 2 hours spent in AVID class talking about career exploration. That tells us exactly what happened. So if you think back to how we described the descriptions for the work plan, they're going to be not quite that detailed, but they're going to be pretty close. Then they'll fill in the number of hours that they actually presented, and then their rate per hour. They can again use their salary and benefits, but I'll talk about another option. And then hours times rate per hour is the total. And we get lots of math errors. So you'll want to double check that math. Now that we all have calculators on our phones, I think it's a little bit easier. Then if they donate goods and supplies like college swag, or maybe they gave everyone a planner, or maybe they brought food with them to share at the meeting. All of that can be valued here, and they'll want to say, well, I brought 100 t-shirts and they were $30 each. Or I brought donuts and I brought 3 dozen and they were $6 a dozen, so that's $18. So you'll want to have them do that math and show that math. I'm going to go back to the time for just a second. They can also contribute the amount of time they spent planning for that presentation. So if they spent 8 hours to plan a 2-hour presentation, which sometimes is completely reasonable, they'd put in here the date that they did that work and that they were spent that time planning for the presentation and the total hours. So the time planning and the actual direct service. Here, it's the stuff they bring to you. And down here, they can count travel. So If they drove, then their mileage from their location to the school and back can be counted as mileage. They'll just want to show how many miles they drove to that. Again, round trip is allowable. So here it would say round trip travel from residence to school, or round trip travel from my work site to the school. They can also, if they happen to need to do overnight travel, which sometimes happens with college recruiters, they can also put that amount down. So lodging, and that can be up to state per diem. So if they spent $500 on a room, but per diem for your county is 94, we can only count 94, not the 500, but we can still count that 94, so it adds up. And then again, the contributor's signature and then the Gear Up advisor's signature is sufficient there. Any questions about that form? Okay. Would vendors at college and career fairs also be included in this? If it is your college and career fair, yes. If you are going to, for example, the PNACAC career and college fair, career or college fair, then no, because that was put on for a broader audience. It wasn't specific to your program, and so it doesn't count. Great question. Thanks for asking that. So when other volunteers are submitting information, sometimes they may not want to disclose their actual salary and benefits rate. Sometimes they don't know it with their benefits. So what you can do instead is use the current volunteer rate, and that comes from independentsector.org, and that is in our grant management manual just as a reference, but it is currently, sorry about that, $40.28. So it's pretty considerable. And so sometimes we will actually say, just use that volunteer rate, right? Because it may be beneficial to use that instead of someone else's rate, especially when they don't know the value of benefits. And it's a fair amount. Then I just gave some examples here about who could be a volunteer, and the list is much longer than this. But again, they could be guest speakers, college campus staff, career or college fair presenters, tutors, mentors. But really, it's anyone you have coming into your school that might be helping your program and advance Gear Up goals and objectives. So it looks like there are some questions. I'm going to just pause that. So thanks, Feather. We always update the new forms. So mileage changes at least once a year. And so we update forms with that then. Remember at the workshop, we talked about always downloading the most recent form from the website. Don't print a bunch of them and use those. And then we will check annually that volunteer rate to make sure that that stays current. And then Josh says, so we will want to be thinking ahead and have these forms ready to go when events or guests occur. Absolutely. You'll want to have these available. Much better to do them while they're on site. If you wait until they're gone, it's very likely you won't be able to get that form. And it takes a lot of legwork to do that. Then we have one, if our teachers or staff are teaching college and careers during the workday, we can't count that. We were under the impression we could. We were told that during career day, we could count our staff's time as match, but it was during their workday. So yes, you can count staff time, teacher time specifically, during the workday, as long as they are engaged in activities that are one of those 15 on the form and support Gear Up goals and objectives. So if they're doing things that are helping students graduate on time or enroll in post-secondary ed or helping advance student or family knowledge about how to navigate the process or financial aid, financial literacy, scholarships, all of those things count. So you do want to capture that. And then during career day, it says we could count our staff's time as match. It was during their workday, but they were all engaged in that Gear Up activity. So yes, that is allowable match. And I don't know if, Faith, can you just confirm you heard that whole thing? Because I'm not sure. It looked like you just rejoined the meeting. Are you good? Can you put it in the chat because I can't see you right now? Don't know what's happening. Okay. It looks like Faith might be getting bumped out. So we'll loop back to her. And then again, military recruiters and AmeriCorps members, no matter what they're doing, they are paid with federal funds, and so they cannot be counted as match ever. Then we have match contribution of goods and services. And so that was the form that I just covered as well. So it's the same form, whether they're volunteers or they're contributing goods and services. So we have covered that. This might also include, though, if your school donates something. So for example, we don't allow furniture purchases, but you all, I believe, at this time have furniture. And so if your district had to purchase that specifically for you, then the value of that is match and the donor is the school. So the school would fill out that form and submit that as match. Sometimes schools get grants that support CCR work. And so if there's a grant that you receive during this contract period that supports this work, the value of that grant can be submitted as match. In some cases, we will require receipts. So for example, in that example, if the school district got a grant to help support the work, then we would probably want as backup the award letter or some evidence that the district received that grant. If someone brought pizzas, if the West Side Pizza just gave you 10 pizzas for a family event, we would want a receipt for that showing that they donated that and the value of it. So some items, like if a recruiter brings swag, they're not paying for that in any way, so you can't really document it. So they'll fill in the value of that. And as long as it's reasonable, we're not going to question it. But most of the time you'll want to include that receipt as backup. Looks like we have a question from maybe the last slides. Can we include teachers who chaperone on a college visit field trip? Absolutely. So they are directly engaged in a Gear Up activity, and so their time counts as match, whether it's during the contract day or beyond the contract day. So space, this is brand new for us. We have not done this before, but we have a form for, it's really interesting. Not all of my changes saved to this PowerPoint. So I'm going to cover a couple of extra things here. One moment while I shift slides. All right. So there's a form that's called Administration Space and Operations Annual Match. And on this form, you're going to capture all of your lead administrators. So everyone now has at least one lead administrator assigned, and we have the superintendent listed here. And so you're going to fill in their annual salary plus benefits. We've already predetermined the allowable percentage of that time, and then it should calculate for you to get that total value. And so that's automatic. So then once you get their information on this form and submit it, they do not need to keep match forms. You don't need to track down their match forms. If there are administrators outside of this list, you're still going to need to collect their match forms every month. Then in the second section is allowable space. So this is your designated office space and the value of that based on a district rate per square foot. So if there's not already a rate charged to programs based on square footage, you can look up the square footage rate based on what you would give that space to community groups. So like if you were renting out an office or renting out a gym to a non-school group at the end of the day or in the evening hours, you would use the same rate there that you charge those entities. And if you don't have that, then you can look up for your county, what is the average square footage cost for a rental space? And you can use that. When I looked it up, it was somewhere around $1 for most folks. So you can use the dollar, or if you can justify charging more than that, you can. So again, this is for your dedicated Gear Up space. Then down below in the last section, it's easy to forget that IT provides support to all of our folks. They all have laptops, they all have technology needs, and probably you have an office phone. So the district office can give us the value of that based on a monthly rate, and then that will be counted as match. And so anything on this form, no other match documentation will be expected or required. So this is a way to capture all of that on an annual basis and kind of simplify those things. Any questions about that? Just give it a moment. All right. Then we have other district support that you may receive in Gear Up that's really easy to miss because it's just normal stuff that happens in a school district. But in fact, you can count any consumable office supplies that you use that you're not being charged for in Gear Up, any printing charges, any furniture and technology purchase that we didn't pay for. And as I said earlier, that nurse prep time for field trips. So all of those things can be counted as match. You need a way to document them and accurately value them. But if you're able to do that, then absolutely submit that as match. So for example, if there's a key fob for the printer and every time you print something, you put your key fob down so the district knows how much you have printed that month, and there's a charge of 2 cents per copy, but the district isn't charging Gear Up that cost, then that value can be counted as match, and it's easy to document that. We'd need that backup sheet that shows how many copies you made and how much they were charged for each copy, but then showing that Gear Up did not pay for them. So again, I may not have made this clear, but if we pay for it, it can't be counted as match, ever, ever, ever. I see a couple of questions. When do we submit that one? So all the match forms are submitted together on the 25th of each month into Box. And there are folders in Box that say match documentation. All right. Beth, thanks for that question about indirect rate. Everyone is actually, some folks are collecting the indirect rate, but we do have some of you that said you were going to use the indirect rate as match, and you don't have to do anything for that. We are calculating that for you. We're keeping track of that. We'll add that to your match collection. And so that really is the easiest match on the planet because you don't have to do anything for it. If you're not sure what your district decided about that, either Feather or Roxanne can tell you that information. Can we match space used for Gear Up events like the cafeteria? Absolutely. You would fill out a goods and services contribution form for that, attach your district rate sheet, and then fill in the amount that you would have been charged had you been paying for that. Yeah, absolutely. So any space that you use for events can be used, even if maybe you met with students in the library one day. That's not Gear Up space, but there's a value to that space. And you'll just have to decide if that is worth the time and effort it takes to complete the form or not, versus the value, and you can make that determination. I would recommend right now that you just collect everything you can and just get into that habit. And then I have a clarifying question. The one-time form, the admin space and ops annual match form, is it due on the 25th of this month? Thank you for clarifying that, Allison. I was speaking to all the forms in general. I would say as soon as you can get that completed, go ahead and submit that. So that might take a little bit to get that figured out. Then we have a question about what is the indirect rate? Great question. I brushed right over that, so thanks for asking. each year, OSPI publishes what's called a federal restricted indirect rate. We pull that down so that we know what each school has for their indirect rate. And that's basically, as I describe it, the cost of doing business. So those are things like probably the superintendent's time, probably some other district office staff time. And admittedly, I don't always know what it includes, but district offices know what it includes because they're familiar with indirect rates and charging indirect rates to grants. So that information is available in your district. We also have it. It's also a part of our tracking support. And so that's why we keep track of it. When we were starting the contract process, we asked each district, do you want to count that indirect rate as match, or do you want to collect it? And so some districts are going ahead and charging Gear Up for that indirect rate. And so that's a little income to support, those district level tasks that we're asking them to do. But others are like, no, we're going to just submit it all as match. So those decisions have been made. Districts can change their mind at any time by letting us know. And again, Feather and Roxanne have access to the decision that folks made and that indirect rate. All right. As we discussed the last week, you do need to provide an annual match training to all of your staff. And again, because we can include everyone in match collection, it shouldn't just be teachers that receive that training. It should be everyone. There is a match training outline. I'm not going to pull that up at this time, but it is available in that match file cabinet drawer. And then once you do that, you're going to have everyone sign in showing that they participate in that on our forms, on our Pro Dev forms. And then you'll eventually enter that into the professional development section of the portal so that we can see that that was completed. We also now have the staff orientation and match PowerPoint available to you on our website. So that's been updated. So if you have questions at this point, Feather is your best resource. Addie is also familiar with collecting match. And so she will be checking in with advisors when you meet about that and how that's going and maybe provide some support and advice. I think it's always good to have a conversation about what I call match opportunities. So as you look at each of the activities in your work plan, always ask the question, what's the match opportunity here? So obviously, if you have a career and college fair, giant match opportunity. You don't want to miss that opportunity and you'll have those forms all ready to go. But sometimes there are those more subtle things like, oh, okay, this teacher donated a box of planners to me and that's match. So catching those things, and again, as you go through your work plan, you and Addie can talk about what that might look like. Yeah, so I see another question. When can we start counting match? Is it December 1st or can we go before? There is some match that you could still document for December and January. So administrators were highly engaged in hiring. District office staff were involved in hiring during December, getting contracts ready, probably having some meetings. If there's a way to go back and accurately document that time, absolutely count that. That's completely fine. But because your contract wasn't in effect until December 1, like you can't go back to November and count match. And then you can definitely count January. Don't forget all the workshop time that folks contributed. And for that, you can include the travel time as well. So it's all the time. And if any of you weren't paid to be there for the full time, you can count any time that you donated as well. For the admin annual match, can we claim on the salaries and benefits or just salaries? It's always salary and benefits. Yeah, again, salaries and benefits, the benefits alone can add 30 to 50% or more to that salary amount. So we don't want to miss those benefits. What are some reasons why we might choose to pay for something directly from Gear Up budget versus a district charge and match? I feel like this is a very local decision. So this is kind of going back to what I shared here. So in some districts, funding is tight, budgets are tight, and so they expect that Gear Up will pay for all of their own consumable supplies and those kind of necessary office things that they need to function. And other districts are very supportive of like, you can use our supplies, but then you need a way to value those. I like that comment. So it's really a local decision. And yeah, you can decide how that's going to work. And it really, I think it comes down to just, can the district afford to do those things, or does Gear Up really need to support them? A question about, was the assistant principal also on the form for annual match? Only if they were designated as a lead administrator. So you all have at least one lead administrator in the district. If you have 2 buildings, you have 2 lead administrators probably. So whoever is the lead administrator should be on that annual match form for time. However, if it's someone that just comes to a meeting sometimes, might meet with Gear Up team, but isn't really the lead, then you should collect a match form monthly for them. You're all thinking about the right things. These are great questions. And I
Marcy,
think, yeah, go ahead, Beth.
you had mentioned, and I apologize if you mentioned this already, but you had been talking about college and career fairs, and I forgot, I wasn't sure if you mentioned about job shadowing and what your impression of that as a source, since
Yeah.
that's required, I believe, in the grant.
Thank you so much, Beth. Yes, if you are taking students out on a job shadow or a job site visit, then the people on that job shadow or the job site visit, absolutely you can count them as match. And if they do any prep work, same as teachers, if they're doing prep work ahead of time, then that time can be counted as match also. All right, my favorite question of the day. Do we stop documenting match contributions once we meet the 55 cents per dollar? Absolutely. The hard part about that is you're not going to completely know how much you're going to spend until August, because you have that long to spend money. But if you've met the match requirement based on the total grant award, yes, for that year, stop doing match. Match is a heavy paperwork burden. None of us in this part of the world like that we have to do match, because it takes away from student time. So when you're done, you're done. So if you know, for example, well, it's June and I've spent $100,000, I've submitted all of my match to meet that requirement for the year. I know I'm going to spend maybe another $60,000 until August, and I've already met match on that, then you are golden. Don't spend any more time doing match than you really need to do. It's a waste of your time, frankly. And you'll have to do it next year and start all over. So
Well,
yeah, give yourself back that time.
Plus, it's also anything you submit is then subject to be audited, or you'd have to prove it. So if you go nuts, then you're risking even more work for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it is auditable documentation. So you want to be sure that what you're submitting is really clean and solid. What is the incentive or reason to keep documenting? Oh, I think we just answered that. If we meet, yeah, so we're not going to. Yeah, there is no reason to continue if you've already met the match requirement. Then there's another question about the admin space and ops. I mentioned that the top portion would be pre-filled for us. When should we receive? No, I'm sorry. If I said that, I misspoke. So you're going to completely fill that out. The form that I showed was a sample form. And so if you open the blank form, that's not the sample form, you'll see that it all does need filled out. If you need to consult with us about who your lead admin is or who to include in that, let me know. All right, I'd love to know if you know how to use those reaction buttons. I'd love to know, like your limited choices in a react button. How are you feeling about match? Does everyone know how to use that? They should be in the top. Yeah, an oh wow, a thumbs up, a little oh wow, couple of thumbs up. Yeah, they go away pretty quickly, but I see lots of wows. So, or at least that's how I interpret that. I don't think that meant I'm super excited about this. Um, just remember, we're here to help you. Feather is going to be a great resource. Addie's going to be a great resource. Beth always asks me the best questions because she remembers what I might forget. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording at this time. Wait. All right.